Good morning. This is George Sims again. You'll notice that I'm not coming at you from the boat today. Actually, back at home for about a week over Memorial Day weekend. So I encourage you to appreciate those people who have paid the price for us to have the freedoms to do the things that we do. So we're going to talk about the 1040 talks again, and if you've watched these things in order, you've already seen all the overview and the outline. So this is actually the first video about the actual topics. And so I'm just going to turn on my little outline here so we can go to PowerPoint today, because I think it'll make a lot more sense to you if we go to PowerPoint. Number that you can leave a message for me if you'd like to talk to me is 502-509-5673. And you can also email me at info@georgesims.com. I'll get back with you as quickly as possible. The 1040talks.com will take you to YouTube, where all these 1040 talks will be stored. The From Here to Success is a place that you can leave a message to inquire about the business opportunity I mentioned before. And just as a reminder again, before we even start, that it's not necessary to be involved in that in order to participate or to benefit from these things. So let's just get right into these things. Just a reminder of what the 1040 talks are: the summation of 40 years of education and experience working with people in their quest for more success. And again, I encourage you to go back and watch those other videos in the beginning. Or said another way, knowing what I know now, the first things I would make sure I knew if I were starting over or retrenching at any point in the past or present. I don't know about you, but I've retrenched many times. And I always think that even though we should enjoy, our journey, we should also always be reevaluating, what we're doing and where we're going and why we're doing it and all of those kinds of things. A couple more reminders. Again, I'd encourage you to watch these things in order. They'll make a lot more sense. Remember, we're building a foundation here, we're building a building, or building our path. So it makes a lot of sense to do it in order, because we don't want it to be a waste of your time and my efforts. A little bit selfish here. And I also recommend you starting a 1040 notebook, 1040 Talks notebook. Take notes. It's one thing to watch these videos. 3 years from now, you say, well, yeah, I've seen that. It's another thing to actually study these things. I've said before, if you don't want to learn, practice and internalize these things. So taking notes is important, just like you would have taken if you're going to a college someplace. I'm not trying to equate this to a college education, but in a lot of ways, it's more important. These things have been more important to me in my life than any degree that I've ever gotten. So you can make of that whatever you wish to make of it. I also like to really quickly review of why. Number one, because over the years I used to do this in person and people have asked. Number two, I promised someone who's passed away that I would do it, and you've already heard me talk about Kevin. And for those involved with me, they're working toward creating a residual income. From Here to Success.com will get you over to something that you can inquire about that. And just a reminder, obviously your participation in that situation is optional, and you don't have to be involved in any business opportunity to study, internalize, and utilize this information. A quick review of the outline today is about the formula for success. The second one will be concept of leverage, life purposes, auto-suggestion, etc. I'll just let you've already seen those, so I'll just go on with what we need. Why do we need a formula? Why do we even need a formula? Because, and over the years, I've been able to identify three distinct problems. Number one is understanding the difference between what is important and what is not. I myself have spent many hours in my life doing something that's very unimportant to my main goal. And I'm sure you have too. So that's a problem that runs across humans nature, because we don't really know what we don't know. Well, that seems very obvious, doesn't it? But you know what? Most people really don't know what they don't know. And a lot of times they're not willing to admit what they don't know. So it's all about perspective. Our perspective of how open we are to learning new things, and about open we are to the limits. We also have to understand that we all have preconceived biases. So what is our objectivity level? One thing I think that I know for sure is that babies aren't born with biases. So everything, all of the biases and the prejudices they've learned from somewhere. Sometimes we have to go back and unlearn some of the things that we've learned in order to be able to have total objectivity. And that's very difficult to do. The second of those problems is that even if we understand and realize that we have biases and priorities and habits that we don't think are that beneficial or that we want to change, most of us really do not know how to go about changing that because we don't understand the human psyche well enough or the human mind well enough, or that we don't really even take the time. There's many of us that don't do that. And I know I was guilty of that. I had no idea. I didn't, maybe at some point in my life, at several points in my life, I really haven't been happy with the person who I was. I'm not saying I would, maybe not always unhappy, but just wanting more or wanting different. And before I learned how to change those biases and priorities and habits, it was very, very difficult process. Now, does that mean that I've changed everything? No, but at least now I know how, or at least I think I have some inkling on how. And that's one of the things I'd like to share with you. The third big reason I think we need a formula is not having a well-defined chief aim or purpose in life. So in other words, if we're out there kind of wandering around the wilderness, cutting trees as we go without a definite plan, then that's a problem, especially if we want something more. If we have well-intentioned ambitions, so we need a chief aim. Before we can make a plan, we have to have goals. And before we can actually make goals, then we have to have we have to understand what our chief aim and purpose in life is. So that's what I say, the reason why we need to have a formula. Now, you notice I said a formula for success. Am I claiming to have the formula for success? Absolutely not. But this is a formula which has worked well for a lot of people. It's worked well for me in those times when I've applied it and utilized it. So what is it? I say that our success is a function of us as individuals and the vehicles that we choose for our success. For those of you that are mathematically inclined out there, then we might say that our success is equal to the individual times the vehicle. And I want you to notice also that I've got a times or a multiplication point in there rather than a plus sign, because there's many times when we change something, one thing as an individual or one thing in our vehicle, that it has a multiplying effect on our success. And oftentimes too, by the same token, if we have a weakness in either one of those two areas, then it has a multiplying effect on the lack of success or on the success that we're looking for. Now, if you really want to get totally mathematical, then we can come down and say S is equal to I times V. So I would like for you to write that down someplace, ingrain it in your mind, be able to quote it. S is equal to I times V. Now, you know that I've spent, I think by now, that I've spent 40 some years working in the field of personal development and business building and people building organizations and mentoring and all that kind of stuff. But actually, my undergraduate's in engineering. I think I've already mentioned that. I'm saying that only because of this. I can't tell you how many times people have asked me, well, what in the world, are you doing in this type of a business with an engineering degree if you start? Well, first of all, I never intended to be an engineer. I just wanted to get a technical undergraduate with an MBA so that I can do whatever I wanted to do in life once I found out that I wanted to change. But you know what? I think what the engineering degree and my experience of 6 or 8 years in the engineering profession taught me was to be rational or to take an analytical approach to all things in life when we're talking about building foundations. So in other words, we can learn all the foo-foo stuff later, but I think we really need to be fundamentally and be very deductive when we're talking about changing our lives and creating a formula for success. Now, you'll notice here what we do is that I break down the individual into 5 different categories: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and financial. Let's talk about those a little bit. The mental are those things that we learn. The emotional is our glass half empty and half full. The financial is our money side of our individual situation. The physical is how we treat our bodies. And the spiritual, we don't really get into religion there, but we talk about the ability to believe in something. Now, we're going to go into those in more detail later, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But I also would hope that you would try to draw this out, save it, and keep it for notes and make it, because when we're talking about the vehicles that we choose in our endeavors, because we should have more than one, to be quite frank with you, then we're talking about suitability, viability, and reliability. So we're going to go into all those in more detail, but I just wanted to make sure you could be able to see that. An awful lot of what I share, or I'd say 95% of what I share, I've gotten somewhere else, or that I've read, or I've learned from my mentors. The thing I've tried to do is to put this information into a rational, analytical format so that a person can build on it, because we can get deluged with tremendous amounts of information. Everybody is out there offering us all kinds of information about personal development and about success and all those kinds of things. And most people are out there telling us what we need to be doing, but very few tell us how to go about doing that. This is my rule, a rule that I made up for myself personally, and then share with other people. I say that our vehicles we utilize must never be the limiting element for our success journey. Then if the vehicle isn't the limiting element, then the individual needs to be the limiting element. And we'll talk a little bit more about that why later. But why should we always eliminate the vehicle? And I kind of use this as an analysis. Supposing I'm going to be in a bicycle race for 5 miles, because I'd never make it, probably much more than that. But I'm going to be in this bicycle race, and I want to win this race because for some reason it's important to me to win this race. Let me ask you, would you want to lose, or would you want to win because I had a superior bicycle or an inferior bicycle? Or would you want to win on how much effort you put into it, how you were able to ride that bicycle, your expertise? I certainly don't want to lose that race because my bicycle broke down. Or I certainly don't want to lose that race because that bicycle won't go as fast as I can pedal it. Or if I don't want my vehicle to be the limiting element, then in my journey for success, I don't want my success vehicle be my limiting element. Because I say that the height of our success should be limited only by our ability to develop the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and aspects of our being. Because if we take the brakes off, and we can achieve the human mind and the human psyche and the human being are wonderful, wonderful entities that can achieve some amazing, amazing things. What we're going to do is that we're going to talk about the vehicle first. Suitability. Is your vehicle suitable? The first most important thing, before we talk about anything else. And suitability goes both ways. Are you suited for this vehicle? And is the vehicle suited for you? Now, let me stop here a minute. I've told you before, I've worked with hundreds of people, and I don't mean maybe every person 100, but I've worked with lots and lots of people. And I've trained people who've worked with lots and lots of people. So I know firsthand about the situations of lots of people. One of the things I know is that many people choose their career from an emotional standpoint with very little rational thinking. With that said, there was also some famous person one time also said, you know, if you can find something that you absolutely love to do, or like your hobby or your chief interest, and make a fortune out of it or a life out of it, then that's the most ideal situation in the world. And I guarantee you that's exactly true. But you know, some of us out there may have a hobby, or some of us out there may like something that just isn't a suitable vehicle for us, or just will not put out any results. We have to look at rationally things like education, training, our training, and our experience that we've had in the past. Or maybe if we run across a vehicle that we want to take advantage of, or an opportunity, or a job, then what education or training or experience should we have before we embark on an endeavor? Now, I'm going to open up now a whole new can of worms. A lot of you out there are familiar with personality profiles. DISC is the one, or DISC is the one that I've utilized and studied for years and years and years. And I'm talking about all the way back until when I was in my 20s. So and that is a lot of years. Behavior profile there was originally a psychiatrist or a book written by William Moulton Marston, became very famous. And then Walter Vernon Clark was the person who adapted this, or an industrialist psychologist, I guess, or something like that, who adapted these principles to be able to apply to industry. So whether you know about this or not, just if you've sat for a job interview before, or if you've taken any kind of a test, there's a good likelihood that your employer gave you a DISC behavioral profile analysis or something very similar, because this profiling has been used since the 1930s by most major corporations. Of some, you know, the profiling of some type, and DISC is one of the more famous out there. And you'll say, well, George, you know, why is this important? Well, because you see, they break this down into the DISC, and you can read for yourself there what those stand for, but they won't really mean a lot to you until you actually go in and look at the quadrants and study them. So I'm not even going to repeat what they are, but here's the, you see, because we do have personality profiles, and because there are certain percentages of personality profiles in this world, then as groups, we are very predictable. So in other words, if I were to take 100 young people age 25, and I would say, okay, all these people are telling me, you know, that they're going to go out on this world and do certain things. I can already tell you within a few percentage points of what's going to happen to those people by the time they reach age 65 or not. One will be wealthy out of those 100. 5 or 6 will be financially independent. Around 35, 36 will be dead before they reach age 65, and those are old statistics. We are living longer than we used to, so maybe a few percentage points off of that. And the rest will be basically broke. Now, what does that mean? When I'm talking about basically broke is I mean that basically broke is that if they don't have their Social Security check every month, it will alter their standard of life. So that's what I'm going to define as being financially independent. That they would not have to depend upon their Social Security check every month to maintain their lifestyle. Let's take that one step farther. You know, most polls are run on 400 people or 500 people or something like that when they do the polling. Why? Because that's about all it takes when you work with people. That's about all it takes to know how everybody else is going to react. So you say, well, why is this important? Because we have to understand, we think we're so individual, but actually as groups we're very predictable. Now let me take that one step further. As individuals, we're also very predictable. So in other words, if you have a personality profile And if I can see that personality profile, or if anybody that understands personality profiles, then they are able to, or you will demonstrate certain personality traits on a regular basis. When you're presented with certain situations, you'll react the same way almost every time. I know that about me, but most of us aren't willing to accept that fact. But it is a fact. But my point is, if we're going to talk about what's suitable for us, and if we're talking about doing something as a career, then we need to understand, are we really suitable for that career? Are we really suitable for that vehicle? Or is that vehicle suitable for us? And this is one of the instruments that we can use, is by understanding and studying and understanding a behavioral profiling analysis to whether or not this is suitable for us. I always use one of my first acid tests. People want to talk to me, well, what do you think, George, about me doing this and that? My first question is, would you do it for free? Well, what do you mean would I do it for free? I want to be paid. Well, that's not what I asked. I asked, would you do it for free? Is that something that you would do for free? Well, what do you mean? Well, I mean, would you do it for free? Well, no, I'm not going to do it for free. Well, then maybe it's not suitable for you. Oh, you don't like it enough, maybe. Now, does that mean that we might want to choose a career because we wouldn't do it for free? Absolutely not. That's not what I mean. That's to the extreme, isn't it? But remember, that's the first acid test question you need to ask yourself. How well do you really like doing what you're getting ready to do, or what you've done in the past? The second acid test is, if you could retire, would you still do what you do? Some of the most dedicated and happiest people in my life are people who I know that have continued to do in retirement what they did while they were working. I know some people even went back to work for the same companies. I know some people who even volunteer to do the things that they did, during their work careers. Those are some of the things that we just need to think about when we're talking about suitability. All right, now let's talk about the second question, viability. Viability is really simple. Will your vehicle produce emotional and financial rewards in relation to the effort you put forward? Or will the vehicle that you're thinking about choosing produce emotional and financial rewards in relation to the risk that you're taking? Because, there are some vehicles that require a great deal of risk, both emotionally and financially. So that's one of the things that we need to talk about. Risk versus reward. Risk versus reward. Effort versus reward, or reward versus effort. I see it all the time when people talk to me about what they're doing, and they're out there beating their heads against the wall. They don't have the chance because they don't have the right vehicle, because it's not viable either for them, or it's not viable at all long term. When we talk about all these different vehicles, we've got to make sure that we understand, what are we talking about? Well, we may be talking about a job. We may be talking about a traditional business ownership or management. Maybe we want to be a manager in a large corporation, or maybe we want to own our own traditional business. Maybe we're a professional. Maybe we want to be an accountant, or maybe we want to be a doctor, or maybe we want to be a lawyer. Maybe we want to own a retail store. There's all different kinds. Maybe we want to be a franchisee. Maybe we want to be an affiliate marketer on the internet now, because that's a big thing. Or maybe we want to be a network marketer. So we have to understand and learn and understand all these different business types if we're really sincere. Let me go back a minute, because remember I mentioned before about prejudice and preconceptions. Most of us, unfortunately, or many of us, especially a particular behavioral profile type, will base their judgment of whether or not they shouldn't get involved in these particular different things, whether or not they should have a job or a traditional business, get to be a manager, yada, 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 based more upon what their friends say than up on their own analysis, or their biases, or their objectivity has been altered by the opinions of others without basis or without fact. And I'm not trying to be critical here, folks. I talk to a lot of people, and I know that that's the truth. So you don't have to believe me. That's okay. I don't care really one way or the other. But I'm just telling you, this is what I've been doing for 40 some years. The other thing we need to really look at when we're talking about the viability of what our vehicle is going to be, we have to always consider the concept of leverage and taxes. As a matter of fact, I think leverage is so important that leverage is going to be the very next topic that we're going to talk about after the formula for success. Leverage. Leverage is everywhere in our lives. So I'm not going to talk a lot about leverage or taxes, but leverage. But I am going to say a little bit about taxes, because if you think taxes, now, do I think that we should evade taxes? Absolutely not. Do I think we should cheat on taxes? No, absolutely not. But I don't think we should pay any more taxes than what the law requires us to pay. Because, if I want to be charitable, I want to contribute to my own charitable organizations. I want to pay the taxes that I owe. I want to pay the taxes that I'm supposed to pay, that I'm legally required to pay. But if I want to contribute to something, I want to contribute to my own charities. I don't want to contribute to the IRS. And I'm not being anti-government here. I'm just saying that what I want to do is I want to pick a vehicle that I pay the least amount of taxes possible, because there's no adage out there. If you save 10% of your income from the time you're 25 years old to the time you're 65, it doesn't make any difference what you did. You'll be financially independent. And I know that. I think that to be true. The majority of people will never do it. As a matter of fact, less than 1/2 of 1% will ever do it. So the difference is whether or not you pay 15% taxes or 20% taxes, because what if you paid 5% less on taxes and you saved that 5%? Think about how much difference that would make in your life. The other three things that we're going to talk about next, and I'm going to spend a lot of time on it now because there's going to be a whole topic devoted to that, is leverage. What do we leverage? Well, we are able to leverage money, time, and or people. And I can guarantee you that most people never sit down and think about this when they're thinking about choosing a vehicle for their future. I'm going to get into this a little bit. Most of you have heard of this guy here. Wrote a very famous book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. In case you haven't read that, you might want to read that. It's pretty valuable stuff that's got going on, obviously. I have one difference with Mr. Robert, is that Mr. Robert assumes everybody wants to be rich. And I'm talking about financially rich. I'm talking about mega millions rich. And I've said many times, I remember a time when I wanted to be a gazillionaire. And that's okay. But not everybody wants to be rich. And what he's saying, though, is that his poor dad encouraged him to be an employee. His rich dad encouraged him to be a business person, to be involved in business, so that he could become an investor. Because only when you become an investor are you able to have total freedom. So let's not talk about so much about being ultra wealthy as to have freedom. So we're going to get a lot more involved in all that stuff later on, but I just want you to be thinking about it because it's very, very, very important. Dependability. What are some of the things we need to talk about when we talk about dependability? Again, this is one of the things most people really don't think about too much. They might think about, well, how much money can I make? And, well, I like it, but that's about as far as we go. We need to look at future projections for this business or this job or whatever it is we're looking at, or this opportunity 5, 10, 15, 30 years down the road, especially in today's economy, because nothing is the same. Everything changes. I floated through my life for the very first few years and was relying upon some models that had been around for 100 years or 50 to 100 years. Then all of a sudden, because of politics and because of the internet, things changed. So what do you have to do? So you have to be aware of what might or may not happen. Well, first of all, we have to ask ourselves, is my vehicle that I'm thinking about cyclical? Like real estate, I've seen 3 major economic cycles in my business life of 40 some years. I'm talking about major. I'm talking about inflation and depression, or not recession, not depression. We also need to think about, are we talking about supplying people? Are we involved in a business or a job which satisfies people's needs or desires? Doesn't make any difference which one it is, so long as we know what it is. But you see, what happens is that depending upon what the volatility of our vehicle would depend upon whether or not we are supplying needs and desires. Because people have needs in the bad times as well as the good times economically, bad times as well as the good times, but their desires change, or their ability to satisfy their desires. And we're talking about luxury. Effect of the internet. Wow. 20 years ago, it didn't really make a lot of difference. Boy, today it does. And I think that I'll talk about that in a lot more detail a little bit later on. But the effect of internet, that kind of ties in with our past and potential future trends, because the internet will affect what's happening. How would you like to own an old vehicle, like a video store that a few years ago was all about what's going on? It was the hottest franchise out there. Now it's a thing of the past. People are starting to order their food over the internet. They're starting to grocery shop over the internet. They're shopping over the internet. Stores are going by the wayside. Shopping malls are going by the way. There's all kinds of things happening. So we need to really look at all those things. And we need to take into consideration when we're looking at trends, we're looking at generational trends. I'm a baby boomer, one of the oldest baby boomers, right at the beginning of the baby boomer generation. I can tell you the behavior profiles of the baby boomers is totally different than the behavior profiles of Gen Xers or the Ys or the millennials. Totally. They have different values. They're buying different things. We have to look at the economic situation. We have to look at the political situation. Politics has changed our future. We also have to look at that company, that we're getting ready to go to work for, or that we're getting ready to franchise from, or, that we're thinking about getting involved with, their age and their management. So we have to look at all those kind of things. We have a tendency as individuals to think about the hottest new thing. Well, trust me, the hottest new thing is not always the most important thing. Can your body and your mind stand up? Well, some of us are involved in things that are physical. And I know people, we break down over time. Some people, maybe it's a function of how well they like to do something, but their emotion or their mind or their stamina just can't stand. As we get older, we have a tendency to not think as sharply sometimes as we did when we were newer. I still think as well conceptually as I ever did. Do I have the recall that I had once upon a time? Absolutely not. But, as long as I recognize that, and if I can adjust for it, I never had very good name recall anyway. Some of my guys, and gals that was involved with me a long time ago, that knew that I always had people around me to try to remind me of people's names, because I can know everything in life about a person almost, some of the people I was involved with. But when you're going into a meeting room with 350 people, and not always could I remember every single person's name that I didn't see over once every 3 months or 6 months, especially if they weren't a major player. Unfortunately, we have a tendency to remember the major players. I'm going to go back and say it one more time. The vehicle must never be the limiting element for our success. So we want to choose wisely in our vehicles that we choose for our success. We want to choose wisely. We want to be analytical about the vehicle, very, very analytical, take the emotion out of choosing the vehicle, and then save all the emotion for the individual side of that formula so that we can get excited about developing ourselves as individuals, because the height of our success should be limited only by our ability to develop the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and financial aspects of our being. So what I'm going to do there is I'm going to stop there and on the vehicle, because the next video will go into the individual segment of that situation there, and I'm going to stop sharing there for you. And I hope this video doesn't come out too grainy. I hardly ever use this computer anymore. I use an iPad mostly and my phone, especially when I'm on the boat. So again, I want to wish you a very happy Memorial Day weekend. Hope you get to spend some time with your family, and appreciate those people who have sacrificed for our freedoms, and especially those people in your family and your friends who have sacrificed for those freedoms. So I don't know what number this recording will be, but it'll be in sequence. So until the next time, which I'm not sure if I'll be back on the boat or if I'll get to do another one while I'm still at home or not, but I'm hoping that we are able to an ending right here and wrap this thing up. And I'm going to push that little stop recording button right now, and I'll see you later, maybe on the water.